I want to talk about Deku. I do not care what anyone has to say about Deku as a character. One thing you cannot say is that he's trash. He has developed so much since the beginning of this series, and I want to focus a little bit on the development that he has been going through, and I guess looking at the events that caused his development. Because when I look at certain things that are in the story when it comes to Deku as a character, what Deku is right now is very much foreshadowed throughout the entire series. There are 6 things that I have identified in Deku's character throughout the series that made him what he is today. 3 of them are small events that identify Deku with what he is today, and 3 of them are large events that essentially created the identification of Deku's character. But they're scattered throughout the story, and when I look at them, I'm just like, man, it's just so awesome to see Deku's character come around, even though he's in a bad position right now because of these events. So like, comment, and subscribe, because we are on the road to 50,000 subscribers, and we can't get there unless you do that. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about is actually an event that just recently happened in the My Hero Academia manga that has changed Deku's trajectory forever. This is what most people would consider the immediate factor in Deku's ultimate change, but in all reality, things were already put in place before that situation happened. That's just the most immediate event, but it's also one of the biggest events that affected Deku. And that's All For One, Your Next Speech. This is where we actually see the change of Deku rather than the thinking that there's going to be a change in Deku. Because in this particular point in time, Deku was already rogue, working with the pro heroes and separating himself from everyone, including Class A. However, the level of severity that All For One brought created a higher ceiling for Deku to separate himself from everyone, along with his biggest supporter, All Might. The ultimate idea of this event revolves around the mentality of Deku versus the mentality of All For One, and that All For One is displaying that he has surpassed anybody when it comes to intelligence, smarts, predictions, and being a GOAT. Deku's heart in this particular point in time is very much pure, and he's trying to save the world with a smile. And it's not that Deku isn't able to be a great hero and save people with a smile, but All For One is showing him that that's not the reality of the world. In almost every medium in the world, there is a hierarchy of power, and the people who have power are able to create the rules of society. So what is right and what is wrong is only dictated by the person in power and not based on just, which is the direct response to Deku's ideology of saving people with a smile. Because Deku isn't just trying to save people, he's trying to save everyone, villains and heroes alike. But how can you truly save something when that isn't the problem at all? And instead, it's the institution that's the problem, which was created based off of power. We haven't truly been able to see the manifestation of Deku's ideology, or this newfound ideology of how he's going to view hero society in the future. So I believe that that gem that Horikoshi laid is a foundation for Deku's development right now, but the idea of power in society is not going to be in effect when it comes to Deku until it becomes a problem in the story. However, just with the understanding of how power works, along with the manipulation that comes with All For One, this is one of the biggest events that affected Deku's development to this point, making Deku want to separate himself from everyone from the fear of All For One, knowing that that is a true statement that All For One is saying, that the only thing that matters in the world is power. And frankly, All For One is the closest thing to getting that. The second event that I want to talk about is actually a minor event. Now mind, I'm not going in chronological order from backwards to frontward. You know what I'm talking about. This is just how I view Deku's development. But the second and minor event that essentially is a foreshadowing to Deku's development is the scene where All Might looks at Deku after all of Class 1A and Deku, Bakugo, and Shoto return from the Endeavor Hero Agency, where Deku is displaying his newfound skill from Endeavor, and All Might looks at Deku saying, "You do not need to look back at me anymore." That is a direct reference and foreshadowing of the scene that we recently got in the My Hero Academia manga, and I believe in My Hero Academia chapter 317, where Deku again is very much fearful of All For One, that he separates himself from All Might, saying that All Might does not have to follow him anymore. Now, this might be a minor event, but when I look at that scene of Deku going beyond plus ultra, surpassing his limits so that All Might does not have to worry about him, it's not just the action or the thought that All Might had in that time, and it's actually what Deku had to do to get All Might to think that, and that thing was gain more power, which is the exact thing that All For One is trying to attain so that he can control the narrative of hero society, making whatever he says just like the Hero Safety Commission when they have a character like All Might as their #1 hero. Maybe I'm looking a little bit too deep into it, but I find it really interesting that Deku gaining more power is the reason why All Might looked at Deku and said Deku doesn't have to look back at All Might anymore, and that later on in the story in My Hero Academia chapter 317, Deku's lack of power from the fear of All For One is the reason why he is telling All Might that he doesn't have to look after Deku anymore. And this transitions perfectly to the third thing that I feel like is a foreshadowing for Deku currently in the story, which is Deku's meeting with All Might and Mirio when Deku finally gets to explain to us what type of hero he wants to be. This is the very first moment where Deku differentiated himself from All Might's ideals, because when Mirio initially asked what type of hero do you want to be, Deku was going to immediately say a hero just like All Might who can save people with a smile. But he stopped himself and he proceeded to say a hero that can save everyone, and also someone that no one has to worry about ever. This is why I'm really fascinated in his character, because again, the idea of people worrying about Deku is troublesome to Deku, and that is displayed perfectly in the current event of Deku versus Class 1A, where Class 1A is worried about Deku, but he's trying to not allow himself to be worried about. Not just because he's being stubborn, but this is the type of hero that Deku has always wanted to be, which specifically stated by himself, which granted him access to 𝚲𝚙𝚎𝚎 and the events of the 𝙲𝚙𝚙𝚎. Everything about Deku is matching up to things that happened in the beginning of the series, and they're also connected to each other, where the display of this particular situation of Deku finally explaining what type of hero he wants to be was shown earlier in a scene where I feel like was just so amazing of Deku when he did this. When All Might came to Deku's house to try to convince Inko Midoriya to allow Deku the ability to stay in UA and also join in to the UA dorms, Inko initially declined the offer. Now, out of all 6 of the things that I'm mentioning in this video, this is probably the one that not too many people will care too much about, but I genuinely love, because Deku's response to Inko Midoriya denying initially the response to All Might was that it doesn't matter whether she allows him to go to UA or not. He will find and apply for another hero school just so that he can be a hero to save other people. Now, obviously, this is before he explained what type of hero he wants to be, but the one thing that he wanted to stress to his mother is that he doesn't want her to just worry about him, and that no matter what she says, he has an obligation, because he's a one-for-all user, to become a great hero and the future symbol of peace, effectively having his I am here moment. And if that means separating from UA because his mother doesn't want him to do it, then he will do as such, which is a direct reference to what happened in the hospital with Inko Midoriya and Deku, where the decision for Deku to leave UA and go rogue was very much up to his own will, even though his mother is the most worried person in the entire world for his safety. Now, this video went all over the place, but I wanted to bring it to a singular point of what type of hero that Deku wanted to be, and that was a hero that can save everyone and a hero that no one has to ever worry about. Two things can be true at the exact same time. Deku can save everyone, and Deku can also have no one worrying about him. But two more things can also be true at the exact same time, which is actually more realistic, which is that Deku can't save everyone, and Deku cannot rely on no one worrying about him, because that is going to be the reason why everyone will die. And All might just be that guy, and that's why you should check out this video on why I think he's going to die in this arc. Win your zone every single day.